Yo, what is up everybody? Today we're going to talk about ND filters, when to use them, how to use them, which ones to get, and that all after the intro.
Wait a minute.
So before I start explaining when to use an ND filter, how to use an ND filter, and which ones to get, I first want to explain what an ND filter is. So an ND filter is a tinted piece of glass darker than your lens glass, which you can screw onto your lens, making the image darker, allowing you to have a lower aperture, so more wide open aperture, allowing you to get more bokeh without overexposing your shot or having to crank up the shutter speed to a crazy high amount. Personally, why I got an ND filter is for when filming outside, because I want to keep my shutter speed at double my frame rate and also want to get a little bit of depth of field without having to stop down the aperture to something like f16 or f22, because I don't want to, of course, overexpose my shot. And when I was filming outside, I had my ISO to the lowest option, my shutter speed at double my frame rate, but my aperture was too high, making that there was a little bit or actually no depth of field in my shot, which doesn't look very cinematic, so that is why I got an ND filter. So to explain this more clearly, I'm now going to show you guys a clip where I'm using the ND filter and where I'm not using the ND filter. And in the clip where I'm not using the ND filter, you can clearly see that there's less blurriness, so less depth of field in the shot. And in the clip where I am using the ND filter, you can see that there's a lot more depth of field, making the image more blurry in the background or in the foreground. So now I'm gonna explain when you would ever want to use an ND filter. So look at this shot. This shot is overexposed, and that is because the shutter speed is 1/50th, so roughly double my frame rate. The ISO is as low as possible, and the aperture is as low as possible to get that nice depth of field, but this shot is totally overexposed. And in this situation, you would either crank up your shutter speed or crank up your aperture. And when you crank up your aperture, this is what it will look like. And as you can see, you lose a lot of depth of field, making it less pleasant to look at. Of course, you don't want the maximum depth of field for every shot, but some shots require to have isolation, and depth of field can really help with that. So yeah, if you don't have an ND filter and don't want to lose your depth of field, you can always crank up your shutter speed. But this will look very unnatural because there will be no motion blur in your shot. And motion blur is something we are very used to. We see it all around us. For instance, you can see that when something's moving fast, like my hand right now. So when there's no natural motion blur, people can immediately tell that there's something off. Some people don't know what's off, but they know that something looks amateur or not right. In this shot, there's no motion blur, but you can't really tell because there's only a tiny bit of movement. But I'm now going to turn up the shutter speed of my camera very high, and you can clearly see that there will be something off about the image. And now when I move my hand, you can see it looks weird and unnatural, and even with the small little movements like me talking, people can tell that there's something off. And now I turned my shutter speed too low, and you can also see that there's just too much motion blur for it to be natural. So keep your shutter speed at double your frame rate, but that's maybe not possible because then you will overexpose your shot, and that is the situation if you want to keep your depth of field where you would ever want to use an ND filter. So this is my ND filter. It's made by Hoya, and this is a variable ND filter, so when you turn this around you can see it gets darker, and I don't know, but this is just, I think this is magic. I just don't know how they do this. You turn this piece of glass over another piece of glass, and the whole thing, so not just in one area, but the whole thing turns darker. So I read online that there are two polarizer filters over each other, and when you turn them they get darker, but I still don't get how the whole piece of glass gets darker without leaving spots open, and it's just magic. So I recommend for people shooting video to buy an ND filter for their lenses with a wide aperture. So without that nice depth of field or that natural motion blur, your shot can look less cinematic than it could possibly get. So really recommend for people shooting video again to buy an ND filter, possibly from this brand. I would not recommend buying cheap ND filters because it can cause all kinds of artifacts like your image being unsharp, or chromatic aberration, stuff like that, or vignetting around the edges. Just investing good money in this. This one cost me 125 euros. So the link's gonna be in the description. I would really not recommend buying a cheap one because Why would you ever put a piece of plastic or a low quality piece of glass in front of an expensive lens? It would just ruin your image and it would be a waste of money. So this is a really good investment and it can really take your footage to the next level. So yeah, I'll put an Amazon affiliate link in the description down below where you can get the Hoya ND filters. And yeah, that was actually the whole video. Hope you learned something. And as always, I will see you in the next video. Keep hustling, keep creating, and I will see you. I already said that. I will see you in the next video. Bye.